Hey, family, this is yours truly, John Seldis, here tonight with another installment of what we call Relevant Conversations with, guess who? Yours truly, Bishop John Seldis. And I am pleased and just tickled to be with you tonight. And I got a very, 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 very special guest on tonight with me. Somebody I've known anyway a very long time, since I guess young adulthood ish, because we kind of thought we might have been grown, but we weren't, and teenage years and all. We go way back. Let's call it that. Let's just say it that way. So I have had the real privilege to watch this person's rise, meteoric rise, who I could reach out and touch because I could call them. When the emails came in, we know each other before the emails was really a thing. Anyway, and before texting was a thing, I think we didn't even have no cell phones, so we was calling landlines. Anyway, they are extremely talented, extremely smart, extremely spiritual, extremely deep, and whole lot of funny. Whole lot of funny. And so one more sequence, then I'm gonna bring them on. You know how you can be giggling? Do you have people in your life, family in your life, that all we have to say is comforter, deliverer, and we fall out laughing because we know what that is because we was there, right? It's that kind of person I have joining us tonight. He hails from the Midwest, like me, just a little north of where I come from, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Same people, same families. Just they was just a little further north. It was about 2 degrees colder up there than it was down in St. Louis, and they've been all over the world. And we'll talk a little bit about the journey. We entitled this conversation "The Artist Journey." And I'm using that in a broad context, and we'll talk a bit more about it. Would y'all welcome with me my brother, and we might have come from the same people for real. I mean, that's a for real thing. Brother, I call him Imam, the elder. We can figure it out. Abdul Hamid Robinson Royal. If I had a clap track, there would be a clap track right there. And
I appreciate you, Bishop. I appreciate you so much. How you doing?
I'm doing so very, very well. And you can tell I'm giggly because we go back way back. We go way back. See, that's another one of those. That's another one of those. That's a story for a different day. Might not tell some of them stories publicly in a way. Yeah. Brother Abdul Hamid, you are. Let me see how I'm going to couch this. You're one of the somebodies when people say it's a doggone shame how gifted they are. Mm-hmm. You're one of those people in my regard, and not just in mine. I mean, you're an exceptional gift to all of us who know you, whose paths have crossed you. You've been a teacher of mine. You've been a big brother of mine. You've been my dearest, my confidant in some cases. I've been yours too. So we have shared. There was a time we didn't miss a holiday season. There was a time, and there was about a decade or more time we was together sometime between Thanksgiving and the New Year, and we were together for a lot of time. I have slept on the floor in your mama's basement. Sure. and vice versa.
True.
Been, I mean, so we go way back. This is where I want to begin. Your journey began in Milwaukee. Talk a little bit about those seeds that were planted back then, and I want to call it those artistic faith seeds that were at your early beginnings. Talk a little bit about that.
Thank you, Bishop. It's always good to see you. Yeah, Milwaukee was a really great place to be formed because there was so much at the time, so much going on. My mother, who owned beauty salons, also worked in the opera company, and so hairstylist for the 1%, right, in Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin. And then at night we would go to the Florentine Opera Company where while I was sitting on the floor as my mother was doing hairstyles and wigs for Beverly Sills, Cheryl Milnes, and all of these incredible opera singers, right? So there was that. Of course, the day before that was probably choir rehearsal at some sanctified church, either Philadelphia, which was a Church of God in Christ, or Morris Temple, or Metropolitan Baptist, or one of the many other places that were a part of my spiritual and musical formation. And then, of course, there was the Music for Youth Symphony Orchestra, and then some kind of flute lesson, and then there was a cello lesson because I played that in the orchestra. There were all of these things going on. And then, of course, you had to be on the organ for the revival. So all of that stuff came together in Milwaukee, which had a first-class opera company, had a first-class, symphony, had first-class ballet. Also, while I was there, there's a guy that you may have heard of from Flint, Michigan, named Jeffrey LaValle. And I was highly influenced by Jeffrey LaValle and Frank Johnson and so many other people from Milwaukee. At the time, I don't think we knew that Al Jarreau was going to be who he became and all the other artists from Milwaukee. But that's how it started. It started on 12. It started with everything. What's the movie? Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. That's literally how it started. We were speaking in tongues and then running to the gala and then going to orchestra rehearsal. And then there was some kind of something. My father was a jazzophile and would wake me up in the middle of the night to listen to Oscar Peterson records. And also he'd wake me up when, he had had a cocktail or two because, he was just sort of kind of saved, maybe a little bit backslidden preacher. And he would wake me up to listen to the Raymond Raspberry Singers. And interestingly enough, like all of those things, and as we talk more, all of those things came to bear because each one of those things showed up either in Chicago or New York or in some other part of my journey. So that's how it started.
And so I giggle because those places are similarly set for me and for us in St. Louis. I think one of my earliest memories of you was you as a young man and going back and forth from Milwaukee to Tulsa, Oklahoma. You were early on as a young man, went to school at the Oral Roberts University.
I sure did.
Mm-hmm.
And there I met a gentleman who you also may know. I was 17 years old. So that was BC, before cell phones. It might have been BA, before ATMs. You understand?
Right.
It was B, a whole bunch of stuff.
Right.
But I met a gentleman there named Carlton Pearson. And he allowed me over there in Jenks, Oklahoma. Helen Stubblefield was his minister of music and organist. And every now and then I'd go over there, and both he and Helen would insist that I play. And so it was there that I met a lot of folks. But yeah, Tulsa was a very interesting, and again, I'm young, I'm just, I'm sweetly saved. everything is still wrong. The women are wearing nail polish and I'm judging them. Karen Carpenter, she went to St. Stephen's from San Diego, Bishop McKinley. And I'm still, Karen, if you're watching this, I still want to know if you got your testimony together. But it was all of that. I brought all of that sincerity and the earnest of all of that. I brought all of that to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And a whole lot happened for me down there, both ORU and Rhema eventually.
That's right. So I can't not think about that time and not call the name of Myron James Bennett,
of course,
and Jimmy, and all
Keith
of those
Childress,
yes,
Souls of Fire.
Keith. That's exactly right. And of
Greens.
course, I was getting ready to say Raphael. Now we call him Raphael.
Raphael, that's right. It was Raphael Gray back in the day.
That's right. And all of those who were family to us in St. Louis. There was a very clear connection from Milwaukee, Chicago, St. Louis down to Tulsa.
Absolutely.
And those were some golden, precious times and years. You ultimately went back to Milwaukee, studied at some conservatory of some sort.
Yeah, it was a trick because I was tricked. Because my piano teacher at ORU, a guy named Andrzej Wasowski, he was a Chopin aficionado who would come down the line of all of those pianists from Liszt and Chopin and all that. I had studied with him, and he said that he had taken a job at the conservatory in Milwaukee. I'm like, nah, for real? So I wanted to keep studying with him. So I transferred back, and then he didn't take the job. And so there I was, tricked. And so there I was in Milwaukee. But, there are no, between that time, ORU, Rhema, Detroit, right, with Keith Butler. It's where I met Reverend Cleveland. It's where I met the Craig brothers, where I started playing for Prayer Tabernacle. Laverna Mason, who my dear, dear, dear friend, and all of the people there in Detroit. Eventually, I went back to Milwaukee. That's how I got there. And Donald Vales told me about two jobs, and one was with Wade out at Omaha, and the other was with my godmother, who you also may know, Johnny Coleman. So it all kind of worked itself around. I had no idea that going back to Milwaukee would lead me then to Chicago, and then from there on.
So let's tell a little bit of that story. You went to from back to Milwaukee, and from Milwaukee to Chicago. There was another St. Louis in there who was in that congregation there.
Man, that cat. His name. He was a genius. He was a choir master. He was the musician's musician. His name was Robert Mays. And Bob Mays, as Johnny called him, as he was called, I got the job. Donald had told me about it, went and played for them and whatever. I got the job and I started working with Bob Mays. I was still in school. Christ Universal Temple, the church, and Johnny Coleman, they were so kind to me that I would finish my last class Thursday noon, drive to Chicago on Thursday. They put me in the Hyde Park Hilton Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday every week for over a year until I finished undergrad, then moved me to Chicago. They took very, very good care of me. And Bob Mays was a perfectionist. I called him a musical tyrant for the first few months when I quit every Sunday for almost a year. Every Sunday I said, this is the last Sunday. This is it. Yeah. But iron sharpens iron, and Bob Mays, a St. Louisan, brought out something in me that really, really, really propelled my career and propelled me to the extent that, I told Dr. Coleman, I told Johnny, I said, I think I might go and get a master's degree. She said, of course you're going to. And that's how I got to Northwestern in the conducting program. I applied, and it is because of their encouragement that I made that move to Chicago and then went on to Northwestern.
So these years are all vivid in my memory,
Mm-hmm.
and they were again they're precious memories to me these days. As I reflect and as I hear you talking, I'm
Yeah.
remembering these moments and these times. I'm remembering your study and watching you from a distance as you mentored me.
And up close at the bread of life too now.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, there was all of that going on
Yeah.
that I'm related to, as you are. These were these times. One time I remember talking with you about, we were talking music stuff, and just the way you were able to share with me in a way that never. And this is what I've known of you and have continued to know this of you. Never in a way that was a big I down to a little you, if you will. Your preciousness, your accessibility. It often it does speak to who trained and raised you, and also it speaks to who you chose to be in the world, in all of your pursuits. And one of the things that I now value more than most things is the way in which people share their lives with you. They don't have to do that, and I marvel at that. I'm thinking about that as you're talking. You went from Chicago
Yep.
and landed in New York City,
I
and
did.
then landed in New York City in not a small way. But by the time you got to New York, good, your behind was on Broadway. I'm gonna just tell it. You were working on Broadway. Talk just a little bit of a skosh about that, because a big slice of your career actually was spent in and around Broadway and musical theater and then other things. But talk a little bit about that transition from the church world and sacred music
Sure.
into conducting and all of that.
So, I mean, of course, my love for musical theater started, and music had started very early on from the conservatory and Sunset Playhouse. And I think the first show that I ever conducted at community theater was Fiddler on the Roof. And here you had this little black boy conducting this, Jewish themed musical. And that was possible then, right?
If I were a rich man.
If I were, and come on now, it's just out of your belly. And so I was at CUT, and this preacher from New York came and heard me and said to Johnny, I want to take him back to New York with me. And she said, I'll loan him to you. And I'm like, Mom, like, what's going on? So that preacher's name was Reverend Ike. And Reverend Ike, you can't make it up. So Reverend Ike took me from Chicago. I packed everything up, went out to New York. And for the first 6 months or so, 9 months that I was there, I was under his wing. And he took great care of me and, let me do all the things that I did up at the United Palace, which is where they're having award shows and all that stuff now and all that. But while I was there, I went and I played this audition for my dear friend Roz Burrow. And at the end of that audition, she walks out, and the director says, "Who are you? Come over here." Well, he did. That guy was George Faison, who was the Tony Award-winning conductor for The Wiz. And with him was musical director and arranger extraordinaire Timothy Graffenreid. And so my first show in New York, pre-Broadway, was with Patty Austin, Peebo Bryson, and every able-bodied singer, dancer, and actor of color in New York City. I mean, I met everybody everywhere all at once. From that, a little show called Truly Blessed, which was about Mahalia Jackson, hit Broadway. I did original music and arrangements for that, Queen Esther Morrow. I told you about the Raymond Raspberry Singers. One of the guys was a guy named Carl Hall. Carl Hall was one of the original Raymond Raspberry Singers who I had been listening to since I was a child. And later I was able to hire him for a Broadway show. He had also been the Wiz, in addition to Andre DeShields on Broadway. So all of it sort of coming together. That was the first one. And then after that, many, many shows. I got to work on another little Broadway show called The Life. Another Broadway show called Five Guys Named Mo. I learned another little Broadway show called Jelly's Last Jam, and several others that I ended up, Ain't Misbehaving, which I did an Australian tour of. And that's where the whole Broadway and theater thing came from. It started, from one little audition. And relationships, as you were saying, relationships are so important. And I've been very, very fortunate that the people that have been around me in my life have been very sensible people. They've all been grounded. And even if they've been crazy, they've been kind. And I think there's something to be said for that. I think there's something to be said for the spirit of kindness and community. I think as Black people, we have forgotten in some ways that our strength is our community and our ability to access each other through kindness. I think that sometimes we forget that you can't make a constellation with one star. A constellation is a grouping of stars. It's a grouping of wonderful things that are happening, wonderful people that are happening, wonderful food that are wonderful thoughts that are happening. And that's what makes it intelligible. And so that's what happened for me in New York. Linda Twine just called me a couple weeks ago. She, of course, legendary conductor who made the way for myself and Zane Mark and Joseph Joubert, who's got a brand new show coming in, yet another one, and, opened the door for us. And I was telling her, thank you, because when we were doing Jelly's Last Jam, I had gotten to, I thought, John, sometimes how you get to the end of what you think you can do and somebody else sees something in you. And so I'm rehearsing and I got to this stuff and I can't play it. Linda, I can't play it. And she said, Buki, you can and you will. Now let's go. And I was shocked outside of myself. And it was because of that I pressed in and, it is the kindness of people the people that saw something in me, and then our relationship. I mean, it's always very comforting to know that you have people who have known you over a period of time, and not just who have known you over a period of time, but know you for real, like not the applause people, but the people that know what you care about, that know what scares you, that know what food you like, you know what I mean? The things that make you laugh. And so I'm very, very grateful. And while you're celebrating me, I mean, I'd be remiss, you are the dean of heaven or whatever it is over there on the East Coast. It is a marker of all of the people in my life that success has not somehow exempted them from accessing humility. So,
yeah. So as you would count that down, I had a flashback. Yeah. This is a good one. This is one of the ones that I can tell. So there are some can't tell, but this one I can tell.
Don't tell it all.
That's right. So you ever had, and this don't happen to everybody. This don't happen to everybody. But you ever had that moment when you're watching television, a big old event, say the Super Bowl, and your people don't tell you, I'm going to be on the Super Bowl, so tune in. But I just happened because, I just happened to be watching the Super Bowl halftime show, and There's this man, y'all might have heard him. He's a drummer, but is the lead singer of a band called Genesis. Phil Collins is his name. And all of a sudden, I see this chocolate man standing in the middle of the peoples and things, singing and swaying and rocking and here's my brother on the Super Bowl singing background for Phil Collins Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So you don't have, I mean, that's not an everyday kind of thing, right? That's not every day, on the thing. And so that was my flashback. You was talking about all these, Hollywood, Broadway, and you did all that Smoking Joe Cafe. Were you the first person to put that show up?
No, actually, I was the second. I learned from a guy named Louis St. Louis, who was the MD musical supervisor on Broadway. He taught me the show on Broadway, and then I took out the first.
You took the touring company. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the first national that was going on, at the same time as the Broadway show.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember that too. Phil Collins and all. Yeah. So here is my brother doing all of this world stuff at the same time. And I know your story a bit. So, and the journey was also a faith-filled journey. I mean, you never did lose. You never did have. I mean, stuff happens, and you go like, "Well, God, what the world's going on now?" But you were doing it in the way that many of us who are musicians and artists and things would have only dreamed to have. And had the sure conscience to share that with a number of us along the way. I got several gigs just because you said, "Oh, you should do that." I mean, so as you are talking about other folk doing it for you, you were doing it, you were paying it forward as well. You had a couple of things converge all at the same time. Faith was happening in the midst of this. We come from the deep Southern Pentecostal brands of Christianities. There are several of them. We both have peoples that baptize in His name, as well as people that baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. You got to know that. You got to be there to know what we're talking about. There,
we're still praying for them. I mean, we're just we're holding a special place there for them. But yes, we do. We have them.
We have them, and we got
them, and we have them, and we are them.
That's exactly right. We got the Baptist and the Methodist.
Oh, yeah.
All versions of the Methodist. They all there. They all in our family. And all of a sudden, for me, it wasn't all of a sudden, but for many, you started leaning into Islam.
Yes.
Talk about that journey just a little bit.
Right. It was exactly that. I think that, as you well know, because of the career, I spent a lot of time in the world and all over the world. And it's a great big world filled with a lot of people. And, coming from our tradition, we learn to hear and listen for the voice of the divine in multiple spaces and multiple places. So the first time I got off a plane in Ghana, even though I didn't speak the language, I could find by the Spirit, you could find the people, or Morocco, or, Moscow, or Jakarta, or Bangkok, or whatever. And so what happened for me was I ended up doing what I thought was going to be an MDiv. I had already been ordained many, many years earlier. Thought I was going to do an MDiv. Didn't need it because, we had already had the fire of the precious Holy Ghost. You didn't need the book learning. You already had that. But I went, and during that first semester, I took a systematic theology class and some other things, and was asked to articulate my theologies. And I realized that I had probably been theologically Muslim for a very, very long time. I would say, without trying to be, salacious, and without, trying to push folks too far, that Jesus led me to Islam. It is because of how I understood theology and what I had access to experientially, because I still say that I'm culturally and experientially Pentecostal and theologically Muslim. But I found myself in that first semester in seminary. I found myself having to present on a tradition that wasn't my own, my whole cohort, everybody to choose something. And I was left with Islam. By the end of that coursework, I went on a little field trip with my class, and I embraced Islam immediately. And that opened up so many things for me, so many doors, both ideologically, theologically, theoretically, energetically, relationally, around the world, around my city here in Los Angeles. And I did not see it coming. It was not a conversion. It was an expansion, and it was an articulation of a theology that for me kind of brought all of the pieces, the new thought pieces and the, apostolic pieces and the Baptist Kojic pieces, and all of those things sort of came together in a way that I was able now to articulate. And I called it Islam. I never called it converting. I called it, or converting, I called it embracing. I've embraced Islam in the same way that one, builds upon a foundation. There's no way that I could be any of the things that I am now if I hadn't been all of the things, right? So,
Yeah, and truth be told, the way in which any of us embrace or embraces our faith traditions and journeys, right? It is not a straight line. It ebbs and flows, and it's up and down, and it's broad and it constricts. It's active and it's living, and if we would all tell the truth, and I say this all the time, there is not one Christianity. There are many, multiple Christianities. It is very clear to me that the Christianity that was gifted to you and I, coming out of Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, that was a mix of traditions. Yeah, some Christians, some indigenous African, some
100%.
the diaspora, right? So the diaspora through the Caribbeans and Central and South America to this, and then what we created here through hoodoo and voodoo, and y'all get scared and everything, but that stuff, all of that mixes in. So the founder of the tradition we come along and grew up in was a root man, and they don't want to tell it, right? But I got straightway, he and my grandmother were friends. And so I grew up listening to the stories of her talking about Bishop Mason.
Sure.
And how Bishop Mason would divine spirit in reading tea leaves in cups, or grinds in coffee grinds in cups, and all of that convergence, if you will. And so if we were to do what you've just suggested within the context of your own journey, there would be a lot of embracing that would not just be so pat and clean and clear, but it is edgy, if you will. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about that. Could you react to that a little bit? React
Sure. I mean, I think. Look, we have to say something about it, and it makes us comfortable to be able to say that I am Church of God in Christ. I am United Methodist. I am whatever. And yet, if you think about how we grew up in holiness, the things that were right and wrong you were talking about not being linear. I don't know if well, I'm older than you. So, I mean, I remember a meeting where they were discussing the women making sure that their dress sleeves were below their elbows, because to show your elbow was considered salacious, because if you bent your elbow, it looked like a part of the female anatomy. There was another meeting where the men discussed whether or not they should wear ties because ties were directional. There was a great discussion about whether or not women could wear pressed powder. There was another discussion about whether or not you could wear dye your hair, or if it had to be a rinse. And these were issues. These were heaven and hell issues. These were sin and redemption issues. These were sanctification and like the world issues. And of course, we have now seen, from the family of the presiding bishop and the first lady of one of the largest Pentecostal denominations in the world, and others, that a lot of the things that were absolute sins, they were black and white. There was a lot of those things, not so much. Or, I don't know, I think I got preached into a devil's hell 2 or 3 times for, playing jazz. And certainly when I, was doing pop, people could not figure out how I could hold on to my faith and, quote, play the devil's music, right? Now, of course, you got your minister of music who comes in off the road from Ariana Grande or, whoever else, you know what I mean? Because that's their vocation, that's their living. And so, I mean, when we look at sort of the genealogy of ideas and of thought, what Bishop Mason and many of the early folks, the folks from the spiritual church, the African retention and Africanisms, I think these are very, very powerful. And one thing that that empire and colonialism and the colonizer wants to do is to separate us and continue to separate us ideologically and spiritually in the same way that they did linguistically and geographically. And 100% I'm resisting that. 100% I am. I'm not demonizing anything on the continent of Africa, whether I understand it or not. I'm going to do some investigation. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to weigh it against the things that I know, and I'm going to make a choice. But I'm not going to let anyone from without tell me that just because it is from Africa. I watched something the other day. A gentleman was trying to academically explain the demonic roots of the 2 and 4 beat. And I thought to myself, okay, right. I mean, and I thought it was a joke at first, but he was, it's got to be a joke, that and not using seasoning in your food. But I mean, nothing. I'm not talking about my Seventh-day Adventist brothers and sisters in the health message. I'm not talking about that. But I mean, it is the impulse of those who want to control, fix, manage, and control the mind's movement, right, and messages of Black and brown people. So they start by demonizing it, then they colonize it, and then they market it and monetize it back to you, right? They tell you that what you're doing is ignorant, and then they have a conference after they've made you bad. They have a conference and invite you to it where they try and do the same thing that you did. So I feel very, very strongly about, here's an example, John. First time I went to Morocco, I went to I was not, I was really, 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 really early on in Islam. I didn't know a lot about it, didn't know a lot about Sufism, and they took me to a little Sufi gathering. And I walked in and I heard the people and I said, this is a Terry service.
It sounds just like church, that like you knew it.
I said, what? This might as well be Mother Meacham prayer band number 4 over in Chicago somewhere, you know what I mean? Like, this is Arkansas, because the movement of the people. I was in West Africa and I saw the movement of the people. I was out and they were practicing some kind of earth. I have no idea what it was, but what I knew was I knew it. I knew it by the Spirit, because the ancestors, right? It was intelligible to me spiritually. And I think that one of the things that we have done now in the West, is we try and codify everything. And if we don't understand it, we demonize it, or it has been demonized by people who don't understand it or are afraid of it. But I'm absolutely pro Africanisms and African retentions. Even in my own religious tradition, even inside Islam, there are those people who would lift up Arabs as if to be Muslim is to be Arab. And yet, the largest group of Muslims in the world are not in the Middle East. They are, in fact, in Indonesia. And then West Africa has had Islam for thousands of years, 1,000 years. So I think it is all of that. I think it is because I am living in multiplicity. It's one of the things that we learn to be in the world and not of the world. We learn to be in multiples, and those things are valuable to me. And thank you for asking me about that, because as you can see, I'm fairly passionate about this notion that somehow I have to stop being who I was to be who I am. I can't stop being who I was. It is because of who I was that I am who I am. It is my ancestors who could not put a noun and a verb together. It's my father, who was an incredible provider, who did not finish the 7th grade. It is all of those things. It's not just that I've been around the world and been on Broadway and Super Bowl. All of those things are really, really great, but none of that would be possible if the ancestors had not been pushing me. I'm the answer to their prayers, not necessarily just mine. So.
Right. It's so funny. Having traveled some, you go to some of these places, right? And it's a sound. Howard Thurman had this just right. There's a sound of, he called it the sound of the genuine, right? Yes. That then he goes on to explain it, that when you know the sound of the genuine and you know what that is, then you don't have to worry about being on the other end of somebody's puppeted strings. I'm paraphrasing,
100%.
But that sound, and so you're absolutely right. You get off the plane on the coast of West Africa, and you hear the people singing. And I know for sure I hear the same voice parts and the tonality. Don't know the language, don't have to know the language. I see people jerking like I jerk. I see people rolling on the ground.
Yes.
And I know exactly what those moments are. It was you said, you sent me a YouTube thing, and there were some Sunni Muslims, I think they were Sunni, in Istanbul, who had got the Holy Ghost, and they was having a time. They was laying hands on people, and they were falling out. And I got just a tick. My Pamela would say to me, she'd say, "Why are you laughing so?" And I said, "Look at this." He said, "That ain't funny," but it would be funny, like laughing at. It would be, I recognize what this moment and this move is. There's a spirit movement, and we act the same. Yep. We act just the same. In the same spirit moments, just as much as, and here's my corollary. I don't speak a whole lot of no language, except for English, and that some might question. But I'm in Oni, a city just north of Paris, and in a mass, Catholic mass, and it's all in French. And I'm there with my I had a family that had I was close to, that adopted me as their African American son, informally. And I knew when to stand. I knew when to bow. I knew when to, to do all of the things in the liturgy. Mm-hmm. And so my family member said, "How did you know that? Have you been practicing your French, your own Francais?" I said, "No, I know the mass. The mass is not different. It's not different in English or in Spanish or in Chinese. The mass is the mass, right? So I know the parts and the components." Hey, I'm feeling my help now. I know the parts and the components of the mass. So rather what language is spoken into our Father which art in heaven. So when they started to talk, when they started to pray the what is known as the Lord's Prayer, I prayed it out loud in English because it was the time in the Mass that occurred. So it's somewhat the same for me that when you recognize that sound, and it's an authentic sound, it's for real in a for real way, right? You know, there's no mistake about that within our traditions, and I appreciate our own home traditions that taught us how to recognize what Howard Thurman calls the sound of the genuine.
Yeah, there are scholars, and we have we have a few. Sean Crawley works with sonic stuff. He's doing work around the Hammond organ and the sound of the organ. Alicia Lowley Jones is doing work. Jahari Jabir.
Listen, one of my former students, by the way. I just have to put that in there.
Okay. Dr. Jahari Jabir, in his work, also deals a little bit with sonority and sound. And there is something about that. There is something about the recognition about that. There is something about the oneness of the spirit. And it wasn't until more recently, that we've been asked to set up camps that would divide us around things ideologically. When in the beginning, before, in societies that were not necessarily literarily based, there were checks and balances. We knew very early on, someone would come up behind you and say, yeah, that was good. You got a blessing, but come back tomorrow. And they weren't being cruel. They knew that there were signs and sounds of an experience that you would need to propel you and move you on, that would qualify you for the next round of things. And I think I'm super grateful for those persons who contemporarily are inviting us to look at what you talk about, and that is the ways in which our organic spirituality taps into notions of connection with both the divine and with our ancestors. It becomes a dirty word sometimes to talk about, the veneration of ancestors. And yet the cloud of witnesses is no different. I mean, it doesn't get sanctified and purified because a Western scholar says it. There are things, when I was doing my research in Indonesia, and I want to talk about all this stuff about gender, and I want to talk about all this other stuff. And I went way out behind God's backyard. And this old grandmother, I was explaining to her about how, we need to understand gender and this, and I'm doing a fellowship and all that. And she said, why would you do that? We've understood, and she went to explain to me the ways that they've understood gender that was so nuanced, so complex, so beautiful. She hadn't picked up book one. I mean, these are ancient ways of knowing. These are ways of knowing that predate our academic intoxication with knowledge in a certain kind of way, and the codifying of knowledge. And so I think my hope is that that I am honoring our ancestors in that way and continuing on. You talked about just, about not looking down and about whatever, but look down from where? I mean, we all have, we all have a piece of it, and I'm interested in it. Like I said, you can't make a constellation with one star. I'm interested to know, what other people are doing around me. I'm interested to know what other ingredients in the recipe are there. You know what I mean? So
it is this that we are settling in on, that for me is the real heft of spirituality, that it is in the context of community, right? It can't happen. It's not in you said it, there's no constellation with just one star. There are multiple stars and planets and all of the heavenly bodies, right? It is for us in the same way here as we grapple with meaning and God and us in both horizontal and vertical and all around. I mean, it is this and the ways in which we identify. I like what I use that term, that phrase all the time. The ways of knowing, these ancient ways of knowing that are beyond these modern notions of what that is, what those things are. Listen, they still don't know how the pyramids were built and how they got all of that information in the stone, right? So some of this ancient mystery, right? The grand mystery is they put it together by looking at the stars and then somehow or another understanding the way the universe flow. Listen here. And then don't get me started with Christianity or Islam or Judaism for that matter. All these what we would call Abrahamic traditions were African born. Mm-hmm. No, don't get me talking, because that can fire me up and send me down a rabbit hole very clearly. Augustine was the bishop of Hippo. Where was Hippo? Mm-hmm. Africa. So anyway, you can get me started, and I go right over there. It is so for me when we talk about this rootedness and this deep rootedness that comes in an organic way. Our journeys are our spiritual journeys that have both faith and artistry. They are linked. It's not beyond me. We talk about a sound and we hear, listen, I hear up above my head, there's music in the air. The link is in that Negro spiritual. There must be then a God somewhere. That's profoundly deep to me, right? And that our people didn't. They hadn't had no book learning, in that context, right? In the context that outlawed any teaching of African peoples in their sojourn here when they arrived here. But listen. It didn't block us because we were already learning when we got here.
Woo. Yeah, we didn't come. I mean, we were enslaved. We weren't slaves, right? I mean, we came here with decades, with centuries of knowledges that had been passed down: herbal medicine, surgeries, farming, all kinds of ways that we know and have known. And I think, that one of the great pieces for me is when I get to access that either through sitting at the feet of some person, in a remote village somewhere and hearing the oral histories, right? I mean, one of the things that is often overlooked is that history isn't just that which is written down, but there are societies who have kept oral histories for generation after generation after generation that can recite accurately, the histories of their people. And it is important. One of the things that colonizers try to do is to take language away, to silence you. And they do that through narrative and other methods. But to sit and hear someone recite, 300 years ago, or my great-great-grandfather. I had many years ago, I was in Chicago with my sheikh, with one of my teachers, and I met the great, I think he was like the 6th or 7th great-grandson of Kunta Kinte from the Gambia. And this man, this dignified, grand, giant of a human being, began to sit down and recite his family's history and to tell us, stories. And I'm immediately, of course, transported, with him energetically, spiritually, transported, because this again is our history, and I think that we are blessed in the sense that we have access now, John. We have access to ways and means to collect and remember. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to do now. I'm trying to, as an old man, I knew I was old when every time I got off the couch, like there was a soundtrack of various noises.
I know exactly what you mean. Does it?
Right.
And it's the very thing you do. We used to do. We used to laugh at Grandma and Big Mama and them because they grunting and carrying on.
Yeah.
But now, look.
Oh, yeah.
I can hear them saying, "Now keep on living, baby.
Keep living."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so it is the privilege that I have now in this fourth quarter to bring to bear all of these pieces, right? The artistic piece and the spiritual piece and all of these other things. I'm being encouraged to write again. We'll see how that works out. And to be in community, because I long for that. I long for the days where, we could just hang out, where the commitments of life, we're not so busy. And I'm trying to engage spaces like that and create spaces like that.
I understand. I'm there too, challenged, and really being challenged from without and within.
Sure.
To name and to write and to share these stories, share these confluences. I grew up in St. Louis, so the Mississippi and the Missouri River, there's a place where they converge, they come together, and it's a great confluence. And I wasn't surprised. I'm not surprised as a St. Louisan that every now and then it floods all over the place there, because where there's a whole lot of water coming together, your cup runs over, if you will. So it is in those spaces and places, and the native peoples understood it. They understood first, you don't build there. That's not where you build. You don't build there. You want to move that thing, and if you're going to put something there, it's only for a season. Because the next season, that thing that water gonna move and expand, and then when it contracts, that's the time to do it. It's how we, the ways of knowing, the ways, and then for me in community, the ways in which we understand ourselves and we order ourselves, and understanding that ordering has some part that I play and some part that the divine plays. So it is fascinating for me, and that's why when I think of you, I think of the artist that you are, because I think in part artists call us to remember, if you will, to pause for a moment and do a little bit of reflecting about where we've come from and where we're going. When one of my spiritual mamas, she says it this way, that what or who are the ways in which you've been poured into that you can't walk away from. Mommy Yvonne Delp, she that's the way she gets at this same kind of thing, and I'm very excited about this time in our journey together, that we get now, when we do get those opportunities to convene and to conference and to be, that we can share that wealth of both knowledge and experience, the wellspring of experience. They're knowing that, listen, there are some named people now. And there's some unnamed. There are some people that don't, they only know James Cleveland as a fact of history, whereas we have a fact of memory of being with him, or Walter or Ed, for that matter, from where we come from. And so those are spaces and the stories we tell now. I feel like them old people, right? The stories
we are those old people.
We are those.
We are. We're those people now. Yeah.
That's exactly right. I remember last thing I remember some years ago remembering the first time I saw the Hawkins singing, the Edwin Hawkins singers. I was 4 or 5 years old. I was 5, 6 years old, I think. 1969. They were on their very first tour, and I had an aunt who loved gospel music, and so Kiel Auditorium, the Kiel Opera House, by the way, that's what it was called then, and it was a big old gospel music jamboree. Brother Joe May was there. Of course, Eddie and Edgar and the O'Neill twins.
Oh, yes.
Privileged to work with you too.
Case dismissed.
Reverend Cleveland was a guest and an artist on that card. The Mighty Clouds of Joy, Brother Joe Lagun and the Mighty Clouds, and Edwin and the choir were the headliners, right? And I remember what they had on. I remember that night vividly. So I was talking to Bishop Hawkins about it one time. We were just chatting, and he said, "Boy, how do you remember that?" I said, "I don't know how I remember it, but I do. Let me tell you more about it." And then I went on down, and I remember the jacket that Reverend Cleveland had on. I got a chance to tell him about this too. They just giggled and laughed. How was it that I could remember that so vividly? But it was the mark that they played in my life that certainly transcended me, right?
Sure.
That then I could. That's a root. Again, it's this genuine. This is one of the places that marked me. So I can't walk away from what that impact, what happened to me, and the impact that had on me and the trajectory of my life and working career. In some ways, those are remarkable moments, right? Those are remarkable moments. We just Uncle Austin just made transition here. And I can remember he was there at that night, and whoever was who in St. Louis made that gig that night. They were all there that night. And so I'm thinking about, what are those ways in which now that we've been marked, we can't walk, we can't say, "Oh, that's old fuddy-duddy," or no, life has led me now in a different direction. No, all of that's connected. All of that journey of the artist, the pen and note and write and lyric and sound is connected. This the last little bit. We done went over time a little bit, but talk a little bit about that, and reflect a little bit about what that means and what that conjures for you.
Right now, I think what's interesting is that I feel compelled to make my own sounds. I have worked with a number of people over the course of my career, and I'm very grateful for it. But I think in this fourth quarter, one of the things that I've yet to really do in a significant way is to use my own sound and my own voice. And so I've been doing different things. I mean, I've been doing a lot of session work. I have been writing, and I really think that the next thing for me is going to be, and I talk about this, what does it mean to live legacy, and understand that even as you're living legacy, you are leaving legacy. And so I'm consciously mentoring younger musicians, working with them organically. They come and, show me this, or Doc, show me that, or, Uncle, show me this, because I'm that now. I'm Uncle, Daddy, Father now. I played something this weekend, and one of the guys said, "Man, you got to show me that, man. Doc, show me that, Reverend." And I played something for him, and had an opportunity to have a conversation about, so where did that come from? I said, well, this little bit kind of came from Debussy, and this little bit came from the Craig brothers, and this little bit, came from, had an opportunity to talk about how all of these streams that we've been talking about that have contributed to who I am and where I've come from now show up in a way that is impacting these young guys. And so now a guy that's never listened to Debussy or Berlioz before, now, the next time I hear him play, I'm hearing French impressionistic music in the middle of some praise and worship tune, or, even amongst the Muslims, I'm hearing, some the sounds of the Sudan and the sounds of the Geechee Gullah people. I'm hearing sort of the convergences. You know what I mean? And so I think for me, one of the things that I want to do is I want to be a good steward, right, of all of the things that have been given to us, because we do hold. We have this treasure in earthen vessels, but this treasure that we hold in earthen vessels is the treasure that's been prayed for and paid for by our ancestors. And so, it is in that light that, this conversation with you, really sort of excites me, because it's important, I think, not just to name it, but to also to sound as resistance, right? This is one of the ways that my ancestors resisted was by making sound. These sounds were transgressive. These sounds were transformative. And I hope that the sound that I make in the earth is that same kind of resistance.
I was very curious about that a number of years ago. So we were gifted the opportunity to follow my natural curiosities while I was also doing the work of the college, and did a trip from here to Central America and then South America and the Caribbeans. And my hunch was that resistance music had a spiritual connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so just like We Shall Overcome is for us both a song of resistance, but is also rooted in our spiritual community.
Sure.
Right. And I had a hunch that existed in other places, especially throughout the African diaspora. And of course, I found it within the peoples in Costa Rica and Central America. I found it in Brazil amongst the people doing candomblé, and I found it again in the Caribbeans, in Trinidad and Tobago, amongst the stick fighting community. The songs that they would sing were spiritual community. I was able to go to the Spiritual Baptist Church and hear tunes of songs that I knew, but also for 100 years they were the people who held on to the Orisha, the Shango, and the Orisha religious tradition in the Spiritual Baptist churches. Mm-hmm. Throughout the Caribbeans and there in Trinidad and Tobago. Found the same thing and found it there. So I am so pleased that we are in this work together. We're family connected together, doing the kind of work where our passions sit, where our faithful and musical and artistic experiences kind of congeal, and where iron sharpens iron, where I can listen to you, you can listen to me, we're listening to others, we're making music together, we're making music apart from each other, and then we're in community. So then we're communing, we're having common union in this conversation that has both what I call vertical and horizontal connection. It is fascinating to me, and to have done it. You referenced this earlier, and it just can't go without me saying something about it as well. To have connection with you, where we don't have to, we can just we connect. Period, and we go right to it. We don't have to talk for long periods of time, but you'll just call, or I'll just call, and we're right there, and that. It's so very, very, that's life-giving for me in these days. Abdul Hamid, brother, Imam, I know you don't like being called that. Teacher, scholar, maestro, thank you for joining me tonight. We're going to have some more of these kinds of conversations. Lord willing, absolutely. And The peace of God be always with you.
Yes.
In the Los Angeles,
Sir.
California. I appreciate you, brother. You know it. Love you and thank you again. And folks, we'll be back at this, having these kinds of conversations. Let me just say one more word since I'm on it, and it's my show. I get to say it anyway. What we need now in the world, with all of what we got going on, right? With all of what we got going on, are spaces and places where these kinds of connections and are occurring, that we're reminded that love conquers hate. Period. Full stop. Full stop. And that we got to figure out what this means, right? We're in all of this. There's something here, and we might as well go on and figure out what it means for us today, because there's a dear friend of mine penned a song. God has work for us still to do, and I believe that very much. Thank you again, brother, and we'll talk to you soon.
Peace and blessings to you, sir.
All righty. All right. See y'all later. And we'll be back at this thing. Same bat channel, same bat time. Peace.